Welcome everybody that's coming in.
Outside, and the people bow and pray.
All right. Dr. Soli, are you ready to get started? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning and welcome to Creatively Healing Our Youth, Processing COVID-19 Grief Using Drama, Music, and Writing. My name is Constance Fields. I am entering my final year here at the Chicago School, the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Program. I am also an actor and I have a background in theater and film and television as well. And I am a firm believer in the power that the arts can hold for our youth. I am joined by Dr. Lori Soli.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Lori Soli, and I am entering my 7th year at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. I'm a professor here. I also have a small private practice, and have been a counselor since 1994, and have worked almost exclusively with youth for about the first 10 years of my life as a counselor, and used music, drama, writing, and the creative arts extensively in my work with youth as an embedded counselor in middle school. And saw firsthand just the power that it had, even back when using things like this were not necessarily so much the norm. So I was so excited when Constance wanted to share this with you today. I hope that you enjoyed our music clip at the end. We have time. We have another version of that song to process as well. So great to be here.
Wonderful. All right. So So last year was a tumultuous year for everyone. I certainly don't mean to rehash it, but it's necessary for this presentation. Somewhere around March 2020, many people began experiencing the full gravity of the COVID-19 pandemic here in the United States. That's when things began shutting down. Businesses, schools, lots of events were canceled, including sports and entertainment, and everyone were thrust into a situation of isolation with um, various sheltering in place things that the states gave. So while this experience was something that everyone had to adjust to, children and adolescents, they were uniquely forced into an experience of adjusting to a new normal. And from that, I personally was driven to this topic because my preteen, once the shutdown happened, began experiencing um, isolation, depression, and I knew it was from the pandemic. And so this topic came about from that. Adolescents and teenagers experience the shutdown with a culmination of trauma and the grief they experienced from the loss of relationships, people, and events, milestone events. Here are some of the effects that COVID-19 has had on adolescents and teenagers. They've been forced into digital learning where many of them maybe had not even experienced having to work on a computer at home, or maybe they didn't have internet access. The cancellation of major milestone events, all of these events, proms, graduation, end of the year trips, they're all things that our society looks to as a normal part of growing up. And unfortunately, our teenagers and our adolescents from last year were forced to cancel all of that, and it was ripped from them. They were thrown into isolation, and that had an impact on their social development, as well as bringing about depression and certain unknown futures that they hadn't had to think about, as well as the death of family members or friends, if that was part of their experience. I read an article in which a senior in high school explained that he had to cancel what he thought was going to be his experience with college because his father had lost his job. So there are all these new things that our young people are having to navigate that 2020 brought. Dr. Soli, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I think that as well as just the impact of it in the moment. One of the things with when an event happens to youth and adolescents is like there's so much development happening within them at any given moment, and sort of just as well as grief, this trauma of having this event happen, and then like this complete like unknowingness. There's no ability to be able to go, well, in a month school will be open, or well, and even now, as we, and this is not something that like has even ended yet, as there's this sort of constant state of unknowing, which perpetuates this cycle of grief, because grief isn't just about a death. It's not just about one loss. Like our adolescents right now are in this perpetual state of loss and grief and unknowing. And we also have to like think about that in terms of the future. Like we don't even know the long-term impacts. We say I'm facing unknown futures, but also the unknown impacts that this is going to have developmentally on them, depending on the stage that each of these kids is at. So just wanted to throw that in as well.
Exactly. So this next slide is a short clip, a short video of a group of teenagers discussing how their mental health has been impacted during the pandemic. It's a short video. There we go.
I'd say 6 months ago that I was pretty much a typical teenager.
I had this anxiety and stress of like school.
Stress between school and extracurricular activities.
My mental health was better than it had been in a long time.
I was pretty happy most of the time.
I was just waiting to hear back from colleges, very excited. But,
COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
The coronavirus is a pandemic.
Many schools around the world, as you know, have shut down.
It's going to have a huge impact.
Right now, with the coronavirus and quarantine and everything, I'd say I've kind of retreated to a more isolated version of myself.
I definitely feel a little more frustrated and sad.
You start to worry about your future, and you start to worry about, am I ever going to see my friends again?
I'd say especially in the months right before the virus, I was really branching out at my new school and making connections, but I do feel as if I've fallen back.
Just really not knowing how things are going to turn out and just rethinking your future and your life, and it really took a toll on me.
What's been worrying me the most during the pandemic has been getting sick, or my family members getting sick.
I'm very, concerned about being a carrier of the virus or bringing it home or spreading it between people by going out.
When you're isolated by yourself, you're really just alone with your thoughts.
I've never said this before, but I miss school. I'm worried that it's just going to extend longer and longer, the closure.
I definitely know a lot of people who are struggling with depression and anxiety.
Especially, I think, for transgender people, I've been hearing from my friends, looking at your own body image in like a camera or listening to your voice, especially for people that haven't made transitions yet, is very dysphoria producing.
I do have some friends that suffer from some mental health issues, and they do seem a lot more down now because of the virus.
I also have a friend who has some family troubles, and I feel like her stress has been amplified now that, like, with quarantine and stuff like that, not being able to see her also makes it worse because we can't really talk about it, and I can't really comfort her the way I would be able to if we see each other face to face.
I do think that it's possible that technology does play a role in the fact that my generation is more likely to suffer from mental health issues.
My, I guess, 15 years old and younger self was very much influenced by social media and seeing people live their perfect lives.
I feel like sometimes that might make people seem like, oh, that person has like a wonderful life.
I think social media can absolutely help build connections between kids.
I constantly message friends. I see their posts. I like their posts. I like to keep up with what they're doing, especially now in a time where I'm not with them every day like I would be in school.
I have family members from other countries, so it's helpful to talk to them.
Technology is just evolving in our day-to-day life now, you know, Zoom and social media, and I'm very grateful for that.
I would tell a person younger than me who's struggling with a mental health issue like anxiety that even if it feels safer to keep to yourself, to ask for help.
Take a little break off of social media because it does have a lot of sensitive content on there.
This isn't the end of the world. You're gonna get through this.
Even creating a vision board of what you want to do 5 years from now, you know, will really motivate you to think more about the future and think more about the possibilities in the future.
I think that the best way to go through anything is to talk it through and just, you know, it's always better when you have someone's hand to hold.
All right, did anything come up for anyone after watching that video? Hello? Oh no.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know if there are questions in the chat or
No,
if
no,
anybody.
so I'm monitoring the chat too, so no
Oh, okay.
questions
All right.
in there. So.
Okay. So, having the opportunity to watch those teenagers talk about their experiences was really thought-provoking, and it got me thinking more about the mental health impacts that our young people have been experiencing. There's been a rise in adolescents dealing with mental health crisis during this pandemic. And the amount of data coming out is still emerging, but the Fair Health data that came out recently discovered that intentional self-harm in March of last year had increased by 91%. And then in April, it also increased by that amount. They discovered that women were noted to be 5 times more likely than men to be treated for intentional self-harm. And this data came from reports, hospital reports, and medical claims. Further, generalized anxiety disorder claims were up by 94% last April, as well as major depressive disorder, which was increased by 84%. Adjustment disorder claims had increased by 90%, and the overdose reports in March were increased by 95%, and in April had skyrocketed to 119%.
I think it's important to note too that as we look at these, while this data is, it looks dated because research takes time to be published, right? So we don't even know what it looks like. Like this was so early on in the pandemic. So like these numbers are from April of 2020. We're now sitting in April of 2021. So as we think about, you know, what's happened in that year, we don't even know that yet. That won't be coming out for another few months. The other piece that, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but that is less easy to discern, and also important to think about when we look at just the research data that's out there in terms of disorders, and is how this is being reported and the access that we have. Because with schools out, like oftentimes school data is how we gather data from teens and adolescents and children, and so that isn't necessarily as available of a means. The other thing that I think that we have probably seen, you know, there's the data being reported now by the CDC in terms of violence in homes. We have seen as absolutely skyrocketing, and we know that that is not limited to partner violence. It's also it's definitely also impacting children as parents have become, you know, caregivers and teachers, and the stress on them has increased. Then so has, you know, some of those behaviors, coping behaviors, or inability to cope behaviors that that are being acted out on kids. So I think that in the future, it's not, as we go back to whatever our new normal is, I think it's important to remember that just because we're in a new normal doesn't mean that the impacts of this aren't still there for our youth.
Exactly. So moving into how expressive arts therapy can help, it's important to identify exactly what expressive arts therapy is. It's defined as a combination of psychology and the creative process to initiate emotional growth and healing as an approach to psychotherapy and counseling. And this is done through the use of music, dance, theater, other artistic forms, poetry. So we're going to take a look at 3 different forms of creative arts therapy. Drama therapy, according to the North American Drama Therapy Association, is defined as an active and experiential approach to facilitating change. And with drama therapy, this is accomplished by storytelling, purposeful improvisation, allowing the participants the opportunity to rehearse whatever their desired behaviors are and to expand and find flexibility between their life roles, as well as to perform that change that they wish to see. And this is definitely beneficial to adolescents going through the trauma they've experienced from last year and the pandemic that we're still going through and the adjustments, and getting them to think outside of the scope that they're experiencing right now and seeing the future.
I would also just briefly add in, it also gives them the opportunity to externalize. I think it's
Yes.
such an important piece of being able to step outside of oneself, take on this sort of other role, but within that, act out what is happening in their internal world, but be able to have a little bit of safety distance between that and be able to look at it and but still be involved in it in a very unique way. You know, if we go back to like the early 90s when performance art was a really big thing, some of you weren't even born then. Like, and so like there's this capacity to be able to express too. Like even if we look at our poet laureate, who performed some of her poetry at the recent inauguration and continues to be sort of this building voice. There's such a role model for that, you know, that voice of creativity and being able to have that self-expression as a means to communicate our internal landscapes.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stanislavski developed method acting, and he was a huge part of the development of this acting styles we have today. I mean, there's a ton of different acting styles, but his method acting allowed for people to uncover and embody what exactly a character would do, what they would be experiencing, asking those questions to embody that character. And this, I'll talk in the next slide about how that relates to counseling because it works beautifully. But drama therapy is similar to play therapy in that it allows the client to embody empathy and become someone else in that circumstance. So again, drama therapy is going to coincide with the counseling goals, because it encourages the client to think in different ways and develop alternative perspectives to their reality. So with the Stanislavski, I know I butcher his name every time because my tongue does something weird, but with his method, acting and counseling, clients are able to or should expect to relax. They use all of their senses. They're identifying their objectives and deciding on their desired outcomes. And it's important that they unlock their imagination and believe in the new outcome that they are working to create. So here are a few different drama therapy activity examples. The Drama Therapy Institute of Los Angeles had a lot of resources available in terms of describing what all these different activities can do and what their purpose is. So I encourage you to look into it for sure. But the goal is to provide techniques that project feelings, attitudes, and allows the client not to feel exposed. And the whole point is to create a safe space.
As we think about this within the, sort of within the bubble that we draw in counseling, I think this is a method that can be used both with individuals. We could do it in groups, and while it feels a stretch to take this virtual, I also believe that this really can be done in a virtual setting, as we are finding there's a lot of things that can be done in a virtual setting that we did not believe were possible a year ago.
Yeah, it's definitely forced us to stretch outside of what we thought we could possibly do in terms of these techniques. This is another slide detailing different activities that can be used. Wearing masks and costumes, using objects and materials, and using role play as an activity during counseling sessions. Did anyone have any questions about drama therapy?
I had one question, Constance.
Yes.
This is Jamie. I work specifically with kids on the autism spectrum, and they stuck me this term with all the virtual groups.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have dual diagnosis of ADHD, ADD. With my older group, we did try dialogue readings and things like that. That was part of the lesson that was already, curriculum-based, evidence-based, and like person-centered. But I found it got very monotonous after a while, always having this dialogue. They weren't really embracing that empathetic perspective, like you were saying, to put themselves in another person's shoes. Mm-hmm. They would process it afterwards, but I feel like I did a disservice because I wasn't able to get to that point with them, So do you have any suggestions, like if they are just reading dialogues on a virtual group, maybe something that could help them get into that role maybe more, or I don't know.
Dr. Soli?
Thanks, Constance. I was just sitting here. You could probably see my eyes like searching, going, okay, so if that were, so Jamie, one of the things that comes to me is, we also have to know our audience, right? Like that's a tough crowd for kind of stepping into this. But I think that one of the things that, I think one of the techniques that I might try to use would be to like almost to have them like, and this sounds a little bit weird, but like to almost have them become the character, become all the characters, not just like so that it's like they're reading it, but then they're also like responding to it, from which, and I don't know if that, it's sort of that, I guess it's sort of a reversal. It's actually similar to an activity that we're going to do a little bit later, where it's like it's almost like, I guess what I'm getting at, it would almost feel like a sort of a gestaltist, empty, cherish kind of thing, where they're responding to what was being said, which I think that when we can be on both sides of the, sort of both sides of a dialogue at the same time, it can help develop that empathy. That's my immediate thought. I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, that's helpful. I just have, unfortunately, a small group in that older group, and one of them hardly ever likes it. He always picks the narrator. He wants to be the narrator every time because it's the smallest part.
Well, you know, and one of the things I think that you can do just in terms of group structure is reinvent the norms of the group and say,
yes,
we'll change roles.
Right, I had to do that towards the end because I could see the patterns.
You're just go, which is what we do, right? You know,
yeah.
That's the thing. There's no the degrees of flexibility that we can employ with this, and really our own creativity, and recognizing like we get to, like, our role in it is certainly to support the process, but we can also influence the process as we feel like is important to, especially when we are dealing with particular groups.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course.
Okay, thank you for the question and the answer, Dr. Soli. So music therapy. Give me just a second. Okay. So music therapy is what allows music to be used within a therapeutic relationship. And this is going to address emotional, physical, cognitive, and social needs of the individual. It allows a communication avenue that is beneficial to whoever finds it difficult to express themselves. Music is so powerful, and it's why teenagers and preteens, they gravitate toward music. It's almost like it becomes a part of their identity and how they can describe how they're feeling and their emotions. It's a very, very powerful medium. So what can music do for teens? Music allows for a greater ease of expression. Like I was just saying, it creates identifying and processing of their experiences. And it also helps them develop social and communication skills, as well as being an emotional release. It can help any teenager, any adolescent dealing with anxiety, depression, trauma, all of those things that have been experienced thus far as a result of the pandemic can be released through music. In addition to all of that, it can help to calm stress. It can help to increase relaxation. We all know when that favorite song comes on, it can transport you. It can make you feel like you're in another world almost, or it can trigger emotions. It can make you reflect on different situations in your past, or it can be therapeutic and cathartic in that you think of positive memories that can be triggered from music as well. It also creates a safe space for self-disclosure and increasing self-esteem.
It's interesting. I just wanted to just float in a thought here as we moved into this slide, and as I was looking at the other, I've got another version of the same song that I played earlier queued up, and I was actually reflecting back to Jamie's question and thinking of the power that actually using music in the readings and how, because like music triggers emotions, including empathy. And including a lot of things that sometimes are the opposition of empathy, right? Like so there's part of me that goes, I would love to see, Jamie, how like you could find like songs that aligned with this, or have students find songs, like have your group like find songs that align with what they're saying in terms of their parts of what they're reading, and like develop empathy through that kind of back channel. It was just an odd, like, wanted to throw it out there because that's how I process, but it's thought.
So one of the interventions, of the many interventions that music therapy has, is that of music listening. And with music listening, the client chooses a song, and it's a song that has a strong meaning to them personally. And then the counselor will then listen to the song with the client and then ask the client questions about what thoughts and emotions may have come up from that song and how it relates to what their current circumstances are. This can also be done as a group therapy technique where group members would name and talk about different forms of music that they find relatable. And then the counselor will find a song, play a similar song to what was discussed. And then the group processes the thoughts and feelings that came up for them from that song. And I think Dr. Soli mentioned that we were going to hopefully have an opportunity to do this with you at the end of the presentation.
So if we have time.
Okay, awesome. All right. The third and final form of expressive arts therapy in this presentation is creative writing.
I had a quick question.
Oh, yes.
So in today's, since we're talking about youth, a lot of youth, since what is this, Generation Z or Alpha? A lot of youth, yes, a lot of youth tend to like, hip hop, and they like rap. And, some of those rappers have quite vulgar lyrics. So how would you, how would, from a counseling perspective, would it be appropriate to, like, if they presented you with a song from, Migos or some rapper, would it be appropriate to listen to that song and then, because let's say they say that is something that is expressive to them? I mean, how would you approach that, especially if it is quite, vulgar?
It's a great question and very relevant. And having worked in schools in the 90s, it wasn't much different then. They seemed to be able to find a way to find songs that had the lyrics that were what we as adults would term inappropriate for youth. So the way that I would combat that would be, when I get permission for the group, I would sign off that I would ask for permission from the caregivers that there may be there may be explicit content in some of the songs that we listen to. If that is not going to be okay for you, for your child, please let me know in advance. Other than that, yes, I'm going to listen. Yes, I'm going to process. I feel like within the space of the counseling office, it's not my job to judge what a client brings. If the student is my client and they come in and they're bringing a song that is dropping the F-bomb everywhere, it's not my job to say that that's not okay. It's what's being played, it's what they're listening to. If it's in their library, it's in their library. What I would ask is, like, what, I mean, we process that, because it, the language that, and we have to, like, remember that we're an element in that, and, like, while it may be offensive to us, it doesn't necessarily process as offensive to them. So, like, meeting them where they are in those lyrics, and also not assuming that the lyrics are what is resonating for them. We don't know. So it's our job to help them explore that. That is my personal stance. I also know counselors who would absolutely shut that down in a heartbeat. So I think that there's levels of that are going to be maybe personally a kind of person choice. That was always the stance that I met, because I didn't feel like it was appropriate or necessary for me to give them the message that what was of value to them was not okay.
Thank you for that, Dr. Soli.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for your question. All right, so creative writing therapy. Narrative therapy is utilizing letter writing, journaling, all of these tools to create for meaning making and restructuring the client's relationship to the issue that they're experiencing. It can be used to readjust the internal world of meanings by exploring the client's emotions and by providing a voice to those emotions that maybe had not been identified before. Writing is so powerful, and I feel like I say that for all of these therapies, but it's so true. There's so much power in our words, and for our teenagers and our adolescents, I'll just say adolescents, for our adolescents experiencing the trauma and the grief from the pandemic, they already maybe felt powerless because young people don't necessarily have a voice in a lot of situations. And when they were forced to lose out on different situations that they may have felt powerful in, or had some sense of freedom, or had some sense of choice, now they really have nothing. Now they really have no power. And so writing could be an amazing tool to help a young person get their power back, their sense of power through their words. And going more into depth with that, this helps our population because they're allowed to rewrite their story. And as I said, they're giving their sense of power and control back, and how they change the meaning of their lived circumstances. It also can help with grief-related situations, and Dr. Soli is an expert at grief and loss. And so I'm sure she could speak more to that, but it increases clarity around feelings that they are experiencing as well.
And yes, I could speak. We could do any presentations on on that topic, but I think that what I will say is, similar to verbal expression. I mean, for people, I mean, we all process differently, right? Some of us are verbal processors, some of us are auditory processors, some of us are, writing, some of us are experiential. I think that this presentation is really helping you tap into all of those different elements. But for those who are able to process, in a writing way, I think that it helps move it from internal to external. And again, anytime we can move things, anytime we can get our story moving, and this is particularly true when processing grief, because the story of our grief needs to be told in whatever means that is, and it needs to be told over and over and over again, because as we tell it, it starts to lose its hold, its wrap, its talons in us, in our hearts, in our souls, in our brains, in our in everything. It starts to loosen that grip, so we have more opportunities to have things other than those talons in us. So if that can be done in a written means, then again, rejoice in that and use it as an option.
Thank you. So the creative writing intervention, creative writing works well in group settings. It works well one-on-one as well, but short daily writing exercises about whatever existing emotions and thoughts or experienced traumatic events can be done. And it also creates a disclosure of meaning that allows for meaning reconstruction experiences they may have had. And that's the end of the presentation. Did anyone have any thoughts or questions about creative writing?
And we do have a creative writing exercise that we can do with you if you are interested, since we have plenty of time.
Oh yeah.
I had a question. I'm sorry to keep talking, guys.
No, thank you. Thank you for talking.
I have a lot of experience with resistance when it comes to writing, especially with the kids with ADSD and ADHD and things like that. Sometimes they'll want just to write a sentence, which I was like, oh, great, you wrote a sentence. That's awesome. Try to overly encourage them to keep going. But a lot of times they are like, well, I don't want to share, or, and in a group, it's all about sharing and building that rapport and peer-to-peer social interaction. So is there any, I don't know, tricks, tips to make them, I guess, more open to sharing what they wrote, or, get those juices flowing so they can write more than a word, sometimes. So I'm just looking for some other supportive ideas.
Constance, do you want to throw something in, or are you deferring?
I'm deferring.
And please, if there's anyone else in this who has thoughts, I certainly have some, but we also, like, this is a conversation. So please, there's a lot of knowledge in this room. I'm looking around and I see people who I know, who I know have knowledge out there as well. But a couple things come up for me, Jamie. The first is, and this is my own philosophy, I guess, as a group facilitator, is I always do challenge by choice. So it is rare when I would make anyone share anything that they weren't comfortable with. One of the writing sort of process things that I used to actually implement with teens in groups was we would do a group write. So literally, like somebody would start with a sentence stem of something, and then somebody would, like, we would literally like pass the paper around to the people in the group. So everybody was adding something to this group thing, and maybe it's about, you know, and you kind of can lob out a topic. Doesn't even have to necessarily make sense. It could just be, you know, the topic could be COVID-19, the topic could be suicide, the topic, I mean, you can use your imagination, you know, there's nothing to say how deep or not deep you can go. COVID-19, grief, you know, abuse, like whatever it is, and then people literally like just add around as you go. And then you, as a facilitator, read the whole thing, but it does become kind of, it's not completely anonymous, but like everybody does contribute. And so I think like kind of that working that way can get people to be more inventive with it. I do think too that, this is kind of goes back to just like kind of a basic group technique of, you know, and again, dependent on the group membership, but like using the group as a positive peer pressure. So like when someone does voluntarily say something, like ask the group how it was to have Constance share that. Constance is going to hopefully get some positive feedback about that. You know, when someone continuously denies, you know, sharing, you can also share out as a group technique. I'm wondering how folks are feeling as, you know, how we can continue to support. I'm sorry, I just looked at your name, Jessica, you know, to share. How is this impacting us as a group when, you know, when Constance shares? How is this impacting us as a group when Jessica does not share? Like, again, not calling out in a negative way, but that is part of the group process. Part of the group process is trying to bring attention to how we're being perceived by other people. So those are just a couple of my very like off the top of my head ideas.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very hard to pass a piece of paper in virtual groups, but I did a version of that. It seemed to go okay. Like everybody write a sentence or two. We'll put it in a story. I've also done Mad Libs. Yep. There's online Mad Libs you can do, which helps them. And then also have you guys, I'll put it in the chat, but I gotta find the link. Pongo teen writing exercises. It gives prompts and themes that are teen related.
I love it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And so like, I mean, and I would say like in, you know, if you're not passing around the paper, and obviously like that, you know, if this was a live group, clearly, but like even just doing it in the chat pod, open up a chat pod, have people write a word, another word, another word, another word, a sentence, another word, a phrase, whatever, like, so that then literally people can see it as it comes.
Exactly.
And a way to do that would be anonymous. And this is actually kind of an interesting thing to think about doing in the virtual world that just occurred to me, is to have everyone change their name to just be person.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So that there is no identity associated.
Interesting.
So everybody is person, and people are putting things in the chat pod. You can't attribute to any particular person. So there's complete anonymity.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Other questions, thoughts?
Thank you for the link, Jamie.
Yes, thank you. All right, so I'm actually going to well, let me get a quick, I wish we had like a voting thing. So we can do one of two things, Constance. I'm just going to kind of be like on the fly with this. So we can I can lead you guys in a brief demo. This means that you are participating in said demo. of a writing prompt that you could use with teens, or honestly with adults, or with anyone, or with yourself. Just of a therapeutic writing method that I have found particularly helpful over the years. Or we could do some more song listening and kind of process that. So if anybody has thoughts on which you would prefer to do, would you put it in the chat pod? That would be awesome. And Constance, I know we had talked about doing the writing, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would love to. Somebody said music, somebody else said writing.
Okay.
Uh,
Well, here's the thought. So, I mean, we definitely know that that music would influence the writing, but I could play the song while we're writing. But
That's true.
after the first prompt, it really is the writing exercise really is very an internal experience. So, and this way too, actually, you could do, if you don't want to do the writing, you can simply listen to the music.
And talk about what comes up. Sure.
Great, and talk about what comes up. We can, because we'll take probably 5 or 6 minutes, which is plenty of time for the writing activity. So some of you may already be familiar with this writing technique, with this writing prompt. It's called non-dominant dominant hand question and answer. So the way that this works is you will need a piece of paper. I know, paper, actual paper, not digital paper, real paper. And a writing instrument of your choice, preferably one you like in a color that you like. You could also have 2 writing instruments if you would like, of different colors. That is also an option. So to start this out, the way that I structured a prompt that we could use specifically for teens, kind of with the COVID things. The way that you can use this structurally across the board in your counseling practice is with the dominant hand, ask the client, or you can prompt the client with a question. So the question prompt that I had come up with that we might want to use with teens would be, so, and to frame this, okay, writing with our non-dominant hand is hard and it looks weird and it's silly. So like in your presentation of this, make sure that you are allowing for levity within it. Like, don't come into this like, we're going to do this really serious activity and you have to like learn how to write with your non-dominant hand right now, or something terrible is going to happen. Because they're going to be like, I can't even read what I wrote. Not the point. Like, be okay, like normalize for the ahead of time. Like, yeah, this is going to be weird, but weird, different, kind of out of context, usually floats okay with adolescents and teens. So the question prompt that I came up with was a very simple one, and it was, hey self, what's happening with you right now? Or hey self, how's it been living through COVID? Or hey self, how's it been to lose fill in the blank during COVID? So you actually have your client, student group, you, in this case you, write that down on your piece of paper with your dominant hand. As you can see, I'm dominant handing it, I'm right-handed. I have my purple pen right here. So I would write that at the top of my paper. And then I will give the writing implement to my other hand, the non-dominant one, and you will write your answer to that question with your non-dominant hand. From your answer, you will then ask another question with your dominant hand. Answer with your non-dominant hand. It doesn't even necessarily then have to become a question answer, although question and answer is usually fairly beneficial. So I'm just going to literally put the music on for a few minutes, and I'm going to invite you to engage in this dominant, non-dominant hand question and answering as you listen to the song. Or if you don't want to do the writing, feel free just to listen to the song. This song that I'm about to play is another version, a much more contemporary version of the Simon and Garfunkel song, Sound of Silence, that I was playing at the very beginning. So enjoy. I'll come back on in a few minutes. Can you guys hear that okay?
I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its scenes while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp, I turned my color to the cold and damp. When my eyes were staring by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs and voices never shared, and no one dared disturb the sound of silence. Fools said, are you too much? Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words and I teach you. Take my arms and I reach you. Not my words, like silent raindrops fell. Of silence, and the people bowing to the neon god they made. Inside flashed out his warning, and the words that it was for me. In the signs and the words of the prophets are beyond the subway walls. Tenement halls and whisper in the sound of silence.
Wow, thank you for that.
Yeah, I actually private messaged Candace. Woo! Sorry and not sorry. I came across this song. It played, I don't know how, somehow, like my husband and I will sit and listen to music via YouTube sometimes, and like I don't know, probably, I don't know, it was probably like last, I don't know, probably last June maybe. Like this just randomly came up on our playlist and started to play, and I just lost it. Like, and every time I hear it, it just, I don't even know it. it just brings up just a lot of emotion for me for a lot of different places, not just around like the grief of COVID, but the grief of our world in the last year in so many other areas. And I put the links up there because like the YouTube video of this is also like visually like really powerful. So with that, little transparency there, I'm wondering how for those of you, like I'm loving hearing this, these sort of like how it impacted you in the chat pod. Thank you, Jamie, for sharing that. How was the writing for anyone who chose to involve themselves in that element of the activity? I'm just curious what came up for you, if anything, if anybody's willing to share.
I will say for me,
thank you, Dr. Clark. I thought maybe you participated.
Of course, I love experiential stuff. I'm like slightly ambidextrous, so it's really interesting, but not totally. So I can write with my left hand, but not just slower. But I love the experience of like my halves talking to each other, right? And it just takes on its own kind of conversation, right? And I love getting to that place where I can speak to myself with intention, right? And space. And so I went with it. It's just a great experience to kind of see the different parts of myself talking to myself, because I have a lot of things to say, and I'm able to kind of counterbalance some of the negative things and some of the judgmental things with intentions, right? So it was good.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I noticed Jessica had put up that, you know, once moving past the difficulty of using her non-dominant hand, she felt it was easier to become more honest. Yeah, you know, it gets easier as you go. One of the things that I noticed is I can't and I just did this activity with myself about a week ago, and it was pretty powerful. But this is really silly, but like I can't write block with my non-dominant hand, but I can do cursive, which was just fascinating to me. I don't know that anybody else could read it, but I think that we are at the end of our time. Everyone, thank you so much for your participation today, for being here.
Yes, thank you.
We appreciate your choice to come to our presentation. I hope that you have learned many things. And if any of you are interested in the PowerPoint deck, we certainly can share that with you. Feel free to reach out to email either the hosts or Constance and I. And I actually have to jump into another presentation as we speak. So I'm going to say adieu and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.